Oh, thanks. Was that Rich? Thank you, Rich.
Angela, you're making me feel really good right now about my poor technology skills. So it's good.
I told you, Andy, not to feel bad because it's not everybody that, had like dominates Zoom. The Zoom.
Yeah. Without Taylor, you're in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much.
We got 4 more in the waiting. Oh, you got it. Okay.
So people keep showing up. So I'm just gonna maybe wait until 4:05 so everybody can join us. Okay, Andy, it's 4:05 and I don't see anybody in the waiting room. So I think we can get started. If you wanna.
Sounds good. Yeah. So welcome everybody. This is our kind of follow-up meeting for our climate group, really just to give you a chance to kind of ask some clarifying questions. So we have a few things that we are going to review with you, a few couple changes, and then we're going to share a few things and then give you a chance to kind of ask some questions. So first, we had set out originally to have the first round of proposals due by June 30th. We're going to just back that up a little bit. So we're going to back that up to July the 5th, so that over the July 4th weekend, we expect all of you to spend any free time you have working on your proposals. No. So we just want to buy you a little bit of time. I think buy all of us a little bit of time and bump this back about a week. The other kind of main thing we're doing, Angela will talk about this a little bit later. We're going to do something on the 30th that's a little bit different than we had planned. So she'll explain that in a little bit. So make a note of that. Instead of June 30th deadline for proposals, going to be July 5th. Now, one other little tweak, we said first round of proposals July 5th or June 30th originally, but now July 5th, and then second round August 31st. We just want to say get your proposals in. So don't like hold them up until August 31st and send in everything you didn't have ready by July 5th. So start getting them to us now and just keep submitting them. Don't feel like you have to wait for one reason or another. Just keep sending them in. We'll view them kind of as they come in. So the sooner they get in, the more forward they're going to show up in the line, but don't hold on to them till the end of August. Feel like you can submit them at any time. So just wanted to clarify that. Angela, I'll let you talk about the webinar stuff coming up.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for making time on another Monday. So what Andy was referencing about a webinar is that, as we've said before, we listen to all of your recommendations and we definitely take feedback into consideration and very seriously. And so we've heard a lot of concerns about New Jersey DEP being the only party giving presentations to all of us. And we wanted that at the beginning to start the baseline of what is happening right now in the state, as we've mentioned before, the 4 of us, or what is being regulated or how they're looking at things, for example. But that by no means was our intention to just have New Jersey DEP as part of this process. So we keep hearing the buzzword proforestation. And we know that it's very important to many of you. So we are looking right now into organizing a webinar that is just going to be specifically focused on proforestation. And this is not going to be a work meeting. So it's not going to be like a meeting like this. It'll be a full-blown webinar with experts on that field. And that's going to be scheduled, as you can imagine, having a webinar scheduled with a quick turnaround in the summer months with everybody going on vacation is very difficult. So we've managed to schedule a webinar for June 30th. And I think it's going to be at 2 p.m. I think that's right, right?
10 a.m. 10
10
a.m.
a.m. Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
10 to 12 approximately. Yeah.
10 to 12. Okay, yeah. So June 30th, 10 to 12. It'll be like a presentation, and then people can ask questions at the end, and it'll just be completely dedicated to Proforestation. So we're very excited about it, and more details will come for, the link to RSVP, to the webinar, and everything. So what else can I say about this? So it's not like we're going to be giving out webinars and with the many different topics, but if there is, a lot of requests for a specific topic or something that the four of us think that could be very beneficial or helpful for anybody, in the future, we could explore the idea of giving another webinar, but just noting that it takes a lot of time and effort to be able to schedule those. And so this is a special situation for Proforestation. Andy, do you want to add anything else to that?
I don't think so. I think main thing is put it on the calendar. Everybody, as many folks show up as possible. Listen in. We're working on some really good presenters, and it'll be recorded, as Anjali said. So if you miss it, this is obviously short notice.
Yep.
And yeah, if you miss it, you can listen in, and hopefully it'll help give more perspective on what we're doing. So
Yeah. So also something I think, because we have now this deadline extension for the proposals, this is something that, if you learn something new, you can incorporate in your proposals, or, it's just more information, right? So this is very good. Do we have the list of presenters that maybe we can possibly share? Eileen, Tom, Andy, I'm looking at the three of you.
I'm sorry, for the Proforestation?
Yes.
Yes, we have 4 panelists, and we're going to send their bios out with the link within the next couple of days. But you know that Bill Mumaw is one of them, because that name has come up. So we did invite him, and he has accepted, and we'll have 3 more that we're finalizing.
Thank you, Eileen. Yeah, so I think we've covered the June 30th webinar, the extension for deadline. Okay, Andy, do you want to cover the collaboration spreadsheet, or do you want me to cover that?
yeah, sure. If you'll throw it up there, we'll talk about that. So
Yeah. Let me share the screen. I'll share, and then you can go through it.
You share, I'll keep talking. So again, another thing that you all have expressed and we expressed was this desire to encourage folks to collaborate, and just trying to figure out the best way to kind of organize that and to help you all do that. So you got an email. One thing I wanted to review, you got an email today asking you to give us the approval to send out your information to everybody within the work group. So please respond to that email ASAP if you would not like your email being shared, your email address. But that's going to be one huge component of enabling you to collaborate a little bit better, is to be able to see everybody's name, their organization, and their email address. Here's another tool we've kind of come up with, and again, we use free tools because we have no budget, right? So just a reminder, we have no budget. So we're doing the best we can with what we've got at our disposal. So we put together a Google Sheet, this would be called? Yes, Google Sheet. All right, sorry guys, I get doc and sheet confused. So this is a Google Sheet, which is basically just a spreadsheet where it's going to be live, where you can put in information. And this is already on Google Drive for our climate group. And likewise, is this going to be shared between the two, Anjali, or is there one for each group? I'm assuming there's one for each group. No,
I think it's
just a single, just one. Okay.
It's just one, yeah, because there's a column that says work group. So you either
got it. There you go. You got it. So everybody just take a quick peek at this spreadsheet here. So you'll see that it says share your project idea below. Okay, so on the left-hand side, you have a project idea column. So include any project details. So this is just a quick blurb about your about your proposal. Okay, so let's just read an example here. Proposal to specify conditions to mitigate risks of catastrophic wildfires in the state. So there's a proposal, kind of single sentence topic, right? And then you have the work group. You're going to specify whether this is for the climate work group or the ecological health work group. So you see that column there. Then your third column is project area of interest. So if you remember in our first meeting or the last meeting we had, we went through the way you do a proposal, and we asked you to pick kind of a one-word kind of topic or description that would best describe your proposal. So in this case, fire is a word that would describe it. And then your fourth column is the geographic focus. So are we statewide? Are we north? Are we central? Are we south? Are we other? So this is going to be statewide. Again, this is just an example. Nobody actually submitted this. This is just us making something up. Next column, additional information you'd like to share. So this one says our organization is involved in prescribed burns of private lands, and we are interested in making recommendations concerning burns on public lands. Okay, so that's just more information you can share. The name, so this would be the sponsor of the proposal, right? The individual writing or submitting the proposal, the organization that individual is aligned with, right? So whatever that organization is that they're representing, their title, okay, their email, and that's it, right? Yeah, okay. So the idea here, again, is just to encourage collaboration. So perhaps you have an idea that you don't really have fleshed out a whole lot and you need help. Okay, so maybe you put down as much information as you can come up with in this spreadsheet, share your information, and hopefully that'll spur someone on to potentially reach out and connect with you. Okay, likewise, if you see a proposal up here that maybe is kind of similar to something you've been thinking about or something that you want to maybe add to their proposal rather than creating a whole new one, maybe you reach out to that individual and you ask, or start a conversation with them, and if it moves beyond an email and it's a phone call, that's none of our business, right? So you can get phone numbers, whatever, but we're just trying to facilitate through email the initial kind of connection between yourself and some others to encourage, again, collaboration. So this is one tool to help you collaborate. The other tool will be that full list of participants in your work group. So I think that's pretty much it. Angelique?
Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe we should take questions in regards to this Google sheet right now, and then leave all other questions for the end. But I think that would be a good idea. I do not see, however, who's raising their hands because I'm sharing my screen. So I do not, Andy, so what you can do is if anybody that raises their hands, you can ask to unmute. That makes sense.
Say that one more time. So you're sharing your screen. I can do what now? Oh, I can see somebody raising their hand now. Yes.
Yeah, so you can ask
So
that person. Cynthia. Oh, I can do
Cynthia,
it.
you can see it? Okay.
Yeah, I just asked Cynthia to unmute herself. Cynthia can. Oh, yeah.
Hi, I wanted to find out if you guys can email us this and also a link to where the proposals can be put.
Yeah, Cynthia. So I think Eileen shared the proposal link in the chat, but I think Eileen can reshare that. Thanks, Eileen. And
Can you email that to all of us, because I can't do, I'm on a phone and I can't do it this way.
Get it from the chat. Okay. Yeah, we can definitely email, just the mass email to everybody here. This is the proposal link. And then this will be in the Google Drive, this collaboration table. So we can add the link to the Google Drive in that email.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I see Paul having a question. Let me just, Paul, I've asked you to unmute yourself.
How you doing today?
Hi, good.
Good. Hey, I just have a technical question because I've never used this Google Sheets or anything. So you just need a web browser, I assume. It's protected against, like, will we be editing this ourselves? Like, can I go up there and put something in the sheet, or will I be sending something to one of you and you guys will manage the sheet?
No,
And-
you can do it yourself. And this is open to everybody. We will give you access.
And it has some kind of protection, like if I make an edit, somebody can't like erase my edit or.
I
Anyone could edit. That's the
Yeah.
sacrifice with these shared documents, is that anyone can share.
Mhm.
Hopefully, our rules of engagement are such that people know, please don't edit someone else's information here.
Mhm.
But when you open up a document for editing, widespread editing, anyone could edit anything. So
Mhm.
just please don't, this is for sharing. So hopefully, like I don't see that there would be a reason for anyone to change what you put in.
It's
Right,
not your
but
final
some-
proposal. It's not your final proposal. It's just the topic of your proposal and encouraging other people to reach out to you or vice versa.
Right, some people just could accidentally mess it up is my concern. So,
That definitely, that is a possibility.
We
yes,
could, sorry,
unfortunately.
it's Tom, one idea. I mean, we could periodically save a copy of it, you know, we have like a backup copy of it. I mean, it's not perfect, but, you know.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yes, someone might accidentally delete the whole thing, right, Paul? Is that what you're getting? So hopefully, yeah, we'll check on it periodically.
All right, I'm gonna ask Nicholas to unmute himself. Nicholas, you can unmute yourself.
On mute. Hello, you
Hi,
can hear me.
yes.
Yep, we got you.
All right, is there anywhere in the NJDEP where they already have a maps of, interactive maps of heavy invasive plant infestation areas? I mean, they're all over the place, but does NJDEP have this information already? Especially in areas like the Highlands or the Pinelands, where they're supposed to have interactive map updates and such information.
This is Tom. I'm aware of one online mapping tool that's similar to what you're describing. It's not a DEP tool, but it's a Rutgers and other partners. It's called NJ Forest Adapt. And there's various tools, maps that were developed that relate to areas that are a particular risk of, you know, various pests and pathogens or wildfire. There's even some maps that show carbon hotspots, you know, areas of the state where forests that store large amounts of carbon. So I'm happy to share that if my co-chairs, there we go, Eileen just posted it. So that might be a useful background tool for everyone to get familiar with.
Mhm.
But there's no invasive plant
Uh,
area. I mean, they're all over the place.
I don't recall. We have people who are participating who have a lot of expertise in invasives. I know my colleague Emil DeVito's on. Emil, is there any online like invasive species? Where?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, is that you, Emil?
Yep.
Okay.
So if you can, if Mike Van Cleef is on, he could give us an update on whatever the best thing for B might that be through the invasive species strike team. I mean, most of the common invasive species are so ubiquitous, they're not mapped, they're just everywhere.
Yeah,
Then-
you got it.
Right, so a map doesn't really do much good, but Mike could shed better light on this regarding emerging invasive species and how to report emerging invasive species when you find one that needs to be eradicated. I don't know if Mike's on the call right now or not. I think he was going to be trying to be on the call from his car, if there's a way to unmute him.
Yeah,
Is
Emil,
there anything of the opposite of areas where are still to a degree of uninvasive?
Well, most most of the Pine Barrens is largely uninvaded because of the soil. There are only a few invasives in the Pine Barrens and mostly on roadsides. And so the Pine Barrens is largely intact. And the other parts of New Jersey that don't have a lot of invasive species are soils that were almost never or very lightly ever disturbed by agriculture. And there's a map from the late 1800s that shows a map of forests that never were converted to agriculture at that time. And that's a pretty good base map. If you go to most of those places, they're not invaded and they have a lot of rare plants and a lot of good biodiversity because agriculture never screwed them up 200 years ago. And that is still holding true for the most part. Not always, because if they're tiny little patches and they're surrounded by invasive species, the invasive species still crawl in. But a lot of the large patches of forest that were never converted to agriculture, they were only used for charcoal or timber or wood burning or all the reasons that people cut down trees many times over. They didn't get invaded too much in the past. They get invaded now, but they're the places that are in better shape if they were never agriculture. That's a strong trend. We've done some research on that shows that to be true. But Mike Van Cleef maybe could elaborate on some of this.
Emil, thank you for your answer. Mike is actually joining us at around 5 p.m. I think that's right, Eileen? Yes.
Yeah.
So maybe we can ask him this question when he joins us.
Yep. Good.
Thanks. So I asked everyone to keep the questions right now regarding the collaboration sheet, so then we can move on, and then we'll certainly take everyone's questions as we move on with the meeting. So Anne, I see that you have your hand raised. I'm going to ask you to, oh, there you go.
Hi. Just for the spreadsheet, I'm assuming that we can use this. Let's say we have this proposal we're thinking of that we haven't fleshed out, and we can put that on here, and even in the additional information column where we are asking for anyone that could give us, more information or background to help us. And then the Google Docs form to actually submit a proposal would be where we would use that when we finalize our proposal. Is that how we're looking at doing this?
You
Yeah,
got it, Anne. That's exactly
correct.
Yep.
Yeah, so on this Google sheet, if you are somebody who has an idea, you don't have it fleshed out, you're looking for help, looking for collaborators, Anjali, scroll over to that additional info. Oh, it's right there.
Right here.
Yeah, good job. Don't have to scroll anywhere. So that additional information you'd like to share, that's where you could say, looking for help. There it is right there. Looking for experts in invasives, whatever it might be. So
Like,
yep.
need help.
Need help. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So I'm gonna stop sharing the spreadsheet. Okay.
Should we ask Anjali, are there any questions? Did anybody struggle with, I don't know if, and there's been just a couple of proposals so far have been submitted, but is anybody intimidated by the proposal, the setup we have? Does anybody need us to go through that again? We'll go through it again if we need to. That's not a big deal. But if you're, let's go ahead. Do we want to get the question there, Anjali, just in case?
Sorry, Andy, I just got a question from Margaret Wood saying, I did not see a way to edit the document. It appears locked to me. Do I have to sign in with the Google account to use this? Margaret, I don't think you need a Google account because I've shared Google documents before with other people, but it might just be a privacy setting that we will make sure that everybody can join the sheet. So we'll correct that for everybody. And Andy, I'm so sorry, you were saying something.
No, you've got a hand raised.
Oh, Karina. Okay, yes. Karina, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, I just wanted to quickly ask for the proposal. Obviously, 2,500 characters is not allowing you to elaborate a lot, so it has to be crisp and to the point. But then the question is also if we are supposed to add a lot of background, or what? It is intimidating in a sense that it's a bit unclear what exactly you are looking for in proposals that are directly a management tool or directly more broad. I mean, you could be putting everything and nothing in there, so to speak. So what exactly do you gain, or is, for example, a grant application, you make your case and you ask for money. In this case, what exactly are the parameters? Do you have some sort of a template that actually clearly outlines what exactly you want to see? So that it's a little clearer, because 2,500 characters is not much. So it should be like a quick background, maybe one sentence, and then like a mini template, and then 2 sentences of exactly the management practice you would propose, and then, or how exactly
Yeah.
would you like to do that?
Yeah, so just to start, one, don't ask us for money. Yeah, we don't have any money, sorry. But if you want to ask for money on behalf of us, we would love that. No. So no, so one of the things that has come up a few times in our conversations, and I would just suggest, is we kind of, I think we shared this a couple weeks ago, but the proposal, the goal would be, just think about it this way. The goal would be for the proposal to be something that can be discussed. Not, I don't want to call it simply discussed, because it's not going to be simple, but the goal would be that we could present this proposal before the work group and there to be a constructive conversation about your proposal. If your proposal is 27 layers deep, we're going to have a really hard time discussing that proposal. And then remember our goal. What's our goal? We're looking to achieve consensus around certain proposals, certain items, right? So if your proposal has 10 different items buried within it, and you have some agreement on 3 or 4 of them, but disagreement on 5 or 6, we're stuck, right? We have this maybe it's a decent proposal. Half of it people agree with, half of it people don't. It's going to end up being a non-consensus proposal because it's so detailed, it's so many layers deep. So I don't know if that's helpful, but I think simplicity is better, and try to kind of, if you have a complicated proposal, try to figure out a way to kind of break it apart a little bit. Instead of submitting 1, you could submit 5. If your proposal's complicated, 5 different kind of points. I don't know if that helps or not, but it helps me kind of think about some of it. Yeah.
I want to add something, Andy. So to breaking the proposal into multiple ones. So using the example of money, if you have a proposal that sort of suggests, oh, funding can be coming from this area to cover this type of management or whatever it is, that could be one proposal, because that is just, like a pathway of getting funding for something specific. But dealing with the issue could be a totally different proposal, right?
Good point.
It's
Yep.
like a complicated process, part A, B, C. You
Yep.
can definitely, submit 3 proposals for that.
Yep.
Tom, I saw you unmute yourself if you want to add something.
Yeah, thanks, Anjali. Just to remind folks again, these are proposals that need to be specific to our public forest lands, which we defined as state lands, but also county or municipal lands. And just think about, work backwards from, ultimately this is about ideas that we're recommending to the legislature, or at least identifying as having consensus or not consensus for possible legislation. So it's got to be something that could be embodied in legislation, that you want the task force to say, this is a consensus item that should be in state legislation that relates to the protection, management, restoration of our public forest lands, right? So that's just sort of so think about it as, is this something that could be embodied in legislation in some way, where the legislature would give some direction with respect to how our public forest lands are protected, managed, restored. I don't know if that helps.
I got thank you, Tom. I got a question in the chat that said, can you please clarify if you respond to the email, if you want if you're okay with sharing your information. No, you only respond to the email sent out today if you don't want us to share your information. And to be very clear, the information that we would be sharing is your name, your organization, if you represent one or business, and your email, and that's it. Okay, I think, so I see, Nicholas, you have another question. Leslie, I see you've been raising your hand because, yeah, you can unmute yourself, Leslie. Sorry, Nicholas, we'll get to you in a second. Leslie, you can unmute yourself.
Unmute, there it is. Oh, get rid of it, Gail, please. Yes, thank you so much. My question relates to this issue. I really appreciate the separating peer-reviewed from general articles when we support our proposals. The problem is, for example, when I send out peer-reviewed articles to people, I usually annotate them because sometimes they don't want to read 178 pages to get to the little piece of thing I want to talk about. And I was thinking of just putting my annotated references in the peer-reviewed articles and then putting the peer-reviewed articles in the articles. But I wondered if there was a better, less repetitive way to address that issue. You follow what I'm getting at? I mean, you can set out a bunch of articles to people, but they don't know what's this one important about? What's that one important about?
Yeah, so I think in the body of your proposal, you can just clearly say, and as referenced by, and just.
No way in 2,500 words you can put those references in. They go in references.
Well, not the whole thing, just put the first, last name and the year.
You can't come close to that in that length, not even close.
Well, then another creative way to do it is a parentheses and just put a number 1 and just make sure that as you put number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4 for the references, as you upload those documents, just put a number 1 for each document. You know what I'm saying? So like the first article.
It's a very successful way to do it because where are the annotations going?
I'm sorry, what was that, Leslie?
Where's the annotation going?
Oh, the annotation on the paper.
Right. Something that, like a 2-sentence description of why this paper is important. How does this relate to your issue? So that someone doesn't have to start reading hundreds of pages in some cases. For example, if you look at the Highlands Council webpage, the Highlands Coalition, they have like 5 or 6 articles about forests and climate, and it's just annotated, and it just makes it really clear why these references are important, and you can get to them and how to get to them. And some of them literally have 15 authors.
Yeah, but I would never suggest for you to write 15 authors.
Just get the 1, 2, 3, but it's the annotated part I'm interested in.
What if we do?
Who's asked about that?
What if we do the name of the first author, right? Isn't that normally how it's listed?
Yeah.
And then page numbers?
Not even close. It's going to take up my whole proposal to put my references in.
Well, annotated references is an interpretation of the article, and we really want each individual participant to make their own interpretation.
That's why
Yeah.
I'm suggesting.
So if you have, we do limit it. It's limited to 10 and 10, 20 altogether. So maybe if you have 20, if you have more than 10 peer reviewed, if you want to use 10 and use your other side and 10 and 10, that's fine. But we are limiting it just simply for, for readability and your colleagues on the call so that they can read them.
Well, I'll put as I was suggesting, I will put the annotation in the thing that's not annotated that references the articles in a way that's a lot easier to access.
There you go.
We'll put critical ones in. It just uses up my other stuff. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. All right, Nicholas, you are next. Oh, I think you're unmuted, Nicholas.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Suppose, for example, it's supposed to be approved, whatever the individual does is supposed to be approved by the committees representing So if I'm a member of the Highlands Coalition or a Parsippany Green Team, I have to send it to them first for approval?
Well, it's up to you, Nicholas. So I'm gonna use Highlands Coalition as an example, as you just mentioned them. So like if Julia is submitting a proposal, clearly Julia is, this is being sent by the Highlands Coalition. So she can mark off, and she went through the process of what it is this proposal is, represents the Highlands Coalition. But if you want to be able to mark that off, yes, please send that to Highlands Coalition, go through that process, whatever it is with them, to sort of, this proposal comes from Highlands Coalition. If not, if it's just coming from you, just don't check that box, and you can
Well,
absolutely submit your proposal.
Well, true or false, I thought it was all organizations and members in organizations. So as an individual, if I was just, say I'm representing myself last to the real world in New Jersey, I'm the only member, I can still do that?
So let me.
Does that make any sense? So I
Yeah,
have to
I
belong
mean-
to an organization. The organization has to scrutinize what I said, and they say, okay, this isn't gobbledygook. We'll send it on.
So I guess, Andy, let me just ask one clarifying question to this, Nicholas. So as we explain in other meetings, if you are a leadership volunteer or a staff person from an organization, and you want to submit a proposal, yes, that has to go through that organization. And yes, you wouldn't vote as a private citizen. You don't represent yourself as a private citizen. But if you're just a member of the Highlands Coalition, and you don't dictate policy of the Highlands Coalition, or you don't make decisions for the Highlands Coalition, you can go ahead and submit that proposal as a private individual.
All right, I'll give you one example. How about if I quote The Once and Future Forest by Leslie Jones Sawyer as a reference, as a Bible of sorts,
So
or a
one-
glossary.
Yeah, one other thing to keep in mind, Nicholas, is remember there's another section on the proposal that talks about kind of who else is sponsoring. So you have an individual who's submitting the proposal. Then you have a section where it says sponsor. So again, if you're a private citizen and you want to make a proposal, make a submission, you can do that. But then in order to have kind of the support or the backing of Highlands Coalition, you would need to run it by them in order for them to kind of sign off on your proposal. So I say all that to say, if I'm looking at two proposals that say the same thing, one is from Nicholas all by himself, and then one is from Highlands Coalition in partnership with this group and this group and this group and this group, guess which proposal looks a little more significant or a little more substantial? So that's what we're trying to like encourage people to do, is to do where you have an idea that hopefully maybe overlays with another group. It's going to mean more coming from some, a proposal that has a lot of support from other organizations, so to speak. But that also is not to say don't do what you described you might do. That's okay too. We're not trying to say don't do that. We're just trying to explain the process.
Yeah, I'm a member of the Highlands Coalition, but I figured to get more votes one way or another, I could step myself out for a proposal, but that's not necessary.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. It does,
Okay.
that has no bearing on reviewing proposals and stuff. Yeah.
Okay,
And for
thank you.
example, if what Andy was just describing, that your proposal is technically the same topic as one that the Highlands Coalition is submitting, we might just group them and discuss those similar proposals in one work group meeting, for example.
Yeah, I'm just worried about how they're going to see it in the end for hopefully not for a compromise or some dilution of the defeat of this, lumbering or logging.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Nicholas. Emil, you can unmute yourself. Emil, are you?
Yep.
Yeah,
So
hear you.
getting back to the sort of the content of the proposal and the fact that we have to go to the legislature, as Tom Gilbert was starting to explain. I'd just like to understand a little bit better. So it sounds to me like we're not trying to write draft legislative language. Is that correct? Because what we're trying to do is promote a certain management scheme. Let's say, we want to, deal with emerging invasive species in natural areas or something like that. So that's the concept. We want to keep natural areas from being overrun with invasive species. Just as throwing some crazy idea out there.
Mhm.
And we know that we don't have a lot of people to do that. And we don't know that we've identified the places where it needs to be done. And we don't know where we should start, which ones are the most critical. So the proposal is going to talk about the science of why it's important and, some of the priorities and how to identify, the best projects to do. So the proposal is going to talk about what we want to do on the ground. And then at some point, there's going to be a discussion. They're going to be, let's suppose that a bunch of people like that idea and it's a consensus idea. At what point does it get put into the language to be sent over to the senator and legislative services? Because if it's just what we talk about, nobody in the Senate of legislative services is going to understand what we're talking about. And then they're going to propose legislative language that makes absolutely no sense, which is so typical, right? In dealing with these biological problems, they propose, ridiculous solutions and scenarios that can't possibly work. So when does a proposal that everybody has consensus on, who turns it into legislative language that actually makes sense?
That's Emil, that's a great question. Andy, I'm going to take a crack at this and then you can please stop me if I'm saying something that doesn't make sense and you can add more. So that's why we're writing a report, Emil. So we in our report, which the four of us are going to write, there's going to be a clear distinction of proposals or topics that reach consensus, because that's what Senator Smith is looking for. What are the topics that the community overall are in agreement with? So we are going to clearly explain what that means. It's not just going to be it's going to be the agreement and the consensus of what you're saying, but it's going to be spelled out for the legislature and their staff, so that it's understandable. We do not put it into a bill language or a draft bill, because that would be crazy. We're assuming we're going to be dealing with many proposals or different issues, and we don't know what the legislature would essentially decide to start with, for example, or what they're moving with or compiling together. So the report is going to be informative in a clear way of what the community is in agreement with, and it's up to them what they choose. And then I'm assuming then they use OLS to then draft that language, right?
Well, that's the problem. Because even if we reach consensus on a number of issues and we write a wonderful report about what needs to be done, and then the legislature decides issues A, B, C, and D are really important and we're going to do something about those issues. If there aren't ecologists and scientists and foresters and people who know what the issue is writing the draft language, then we're going to end up with a draft bill that's lousy right off the bat. And then we're going to have to try to say, you need to change the language and you need to do this, you need to do that. And we'll be trying to roll the ball uphill right from the beginning. Is this process that Senator Smith envisions going to allow our groups to interact with OLS before they drop a bill? Before all of a sudden we see a bill appear.
Make that part of your proposal or a proposal.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good idea, but Tom, go ahead.
Well, I would just say we haven't had this conversation with Senator Smith, at some point we ask
Tom, you're breaking up.
interacting
Just for me or everybody?
Yeah.
with
Yeah, Tom is breaking up really bad.
Tom,
Sounds
think
like
I-
Tom was trying to say that you need to have this conversation with Senator Smith.
yeah,
No, we don't need a conversation. It's been clear we stop at the report.
But
It's a governmental process is that OLS drafts bills. It would be, and at some point, any member of the public can participate. Our charge ends with the report. Now, you know, we want strong recommendations. That's our opportunity. This is our opportunity to communicate issues to the legislature. The legislature then takes it upon themselves to write bills. But our charge is the report.
No, that's pretty disheartening because if our recommendations and our report is supposed to be based on science, all of that science is going to get completely lost when it goes over to legislative services, and it's going to become an absolute nightmare. We're all going to work really hard on something, and then a bunch of people who are not scientists are going to screw it up.
I'm going to very respectfully disagree. I have
Okay.
I have a little bit more faith and optimism in our government, but I understand your issues. But I really would like to focus on what we can do, because this is an opportunity that we don't often get. Just think about it. How often do we get to write a report to the legislature saying, we asked everyone who had an interest in the entire state, and this is what they said. I just want to turn it around to be more optimistic, Emil, if that's okay.
Well, I'm glad you're optimistic.
okay,
All right.
Andy, I'm gonna ask Ken to mute himself. That's okay with you?
Yeah, everybody else too, if you don't mind, when you're done talking, hit the mute button again, because there's some background noises and stuff like that. So if you're not talking, hit the mute button.
Okay, Ken, you can unmute yourself.
Great, thanks. Okay, so I just have some technical questions about submitting this information. So my first question is, can we send links to articles and studies, or do you want the full text in a document?
Yeah, I can answer that. The problem, that's completely fine. If you can put it in the body of the, you know, the description, the 2,500 characters, it's just.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying when we submit it as background information. Some things are hard to copy sometimes. You know, but we could send you, say, a link to an article. Is that okay? Or do you want us to copy and paste the article, you know, into a Word document and then have a document you can look at?
Are you talking about, Ken, in the 2,500 character
No.
kind of? Oh, you're talking
No.
about as a source or
Right.
as a.
Right.
I think we need it copied, right? We would like to be reviewing PDFs, especially. I mean, we see a lot of it coming in through a PDF. Yeah. So if you can, we're not going to be chasing stuff down through a link. No.
Well, and
Okay.
it's also that not everybody has access to all journals, right? So if
Yeah.
it's behind a paywall, we want to make sure that everybody has access.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that was actually my second question, because
Okay.
so one study that I'm using is behind a paywall. Now, there have been a couple of articles that were written that were excerpts from it, and there's an abstract online, but I didn't want to pay $50 to get access to the study itself. So is it acceptable to, you know, use the articles and the abstract?
That's a really good question and a tricky one. I mean, the abstract sometimes it's like it says so much, but it doesn't really tell you anything. Let me think on that. I feel like right? Tom left, but Andy and Eileen, how do you feel about that? Like I think
Yeah, this is a really good topic that we've wrestled with because there's copyright also behind those paywall articles. So we can't just disseminate them, right? But now that, so we were going to wait and see how frequent will this be a problem. What I would suggest is see if you can find that article or a similar one using those links that are in the proposal form for open access articles. The open access articles, we will not have a copyright issue and anyone can access them. So whenever possible, we're asking people to use open access articles. For articles that are behind a paywall, let's do a case by case. So here's the climate work group. So Ken, if you could like send the link to the task force Gmail, send us the link, and then we'll see how we can try and incorporate it for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's very common, but I was working on this and
I
found one
agree. I
today.
agree. So we'll do a case by case for now.
Okay, and my last really tough question here is on the 2,500 character document. Does that include spaces or just characters?
that's a great.
It's a very important question.
It is, and I actually do not know. I would assume it's just. Oh no! Sometimes it can
Words.
be spaces.
Words.
Well, you said it's not words, you said 2,500 characters. and
I'm
go into-
gonna test it right now and I'll put it in the chat. That way Anjali doesn't have to look. I'm gonna go test it right now, Anjali.
Thanks, Eileen.
Yeah, thank you, Eileen. And Ken, we'll get back to you on that. Okay.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thanks. Okay, Greg Gorman, I'm asking you to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. I have two simple questions. When we put our 2,500 character statement in, the focus obviously is on legislation, but not every piece of policy gets in. So can we include policy in our statements, or you just want us to focus on legislative action?
Legislation is policy.
Greg, can you clarify that question? I'm sorry. So your question is policy versus legislation? Is that what you're saying?
Law versus.
Well, sometimes the laws can contain policy, but a lot of times, you know, the laws are written so that the administrating office, in this case, the DEP forestry, issues policy, you know, and they put that in their regulations. And I'm just, because not everything goes into the law.
I could try to take a stab at this.
Thank you.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can
Yeah.
hear you.
I mean, the legislature very often provides direction to all kinds of executive agencies. So I think that's what we're talking about here, because remember, this task force was set up by the legislature, not by the DEP. The DEP didn't ask for a report from us. The legislature asked for a report from us. Now, you know, maybe there are recommendations we might make that the DEP might act on. But, you know, we were tasked by the legislature to give some direction to the legislature as far as, you know, what recommendations might be embodied in legislation. But that can include policies that the legislature wants the DEP to put into place, right? So I think it's kind of one and the same. It's got to be embodied in legislation, but that can include directives to the DEP in terms of the policies that the legislature wants the DEP to implement.
Yep. I agree with all of that. So Eileen got
Well,
back with us, and it does not include.
I said I had two questions.
Yeah,
I
go
have
ahead,
one
Greg, I'm
more
sorry.
question. And this is an easy one.
Okay.
Going back to this collaboration, you know, basically we're going to start with an idea. We're going to do this collaboration. Is there a mechanism that if, let's say I'm Sierra Club representative, I submit an idea, but it hasn't been flushed out? And then is there a way that Sierra Club or whoever the approving authority come in and change the 2,500 to indicate that it's been approved by Sierra Club or our group, Highlands Coalition, whoever we're submitting it on behalf of?
Yeah, so I'm gonna rephrase this question for my three other co-chairs. So what Greg is saying is that in the interest of time, he put together a proposal, he submits it, but we didn't have enough time to get the full approval by Sierra Club. Can we go back and let's say we end up getting the approval by Sierra Club, this represents a proposal from Sierra Club. Can we change that then to, mark that check mark, even though it's been submitted?
Yes,
Eileen,
you
I
can.
see you
Yes,
nodding
you can. We make.
Okay. Greg, I think, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank
Okay.
you.
Great. And so Eileen got back to us, 2,500 characters does not include spaces. Okay. Julia, you're next. You can unmute yourself.
Thank you. My question actually is nothing to do with the submission of it's to do with the webinar that you're proposing. Will that be open only to task force members?
Correct.
I'm guessing that you will be recording it. So after the fact, will it be open to the public? It's not every day you get a Nobel laureate speaking to you.
Fair point. It is definitely going to be recorded. I don't think we've discussed if this is going to be open to people outside of this work group or if we're gonna share with everybody else. I think that's something that the four of us need to discuss.
Okay.
How do we feel about that, Eileen, Tom, and Andy?
Well, it's at their work group's request, and that's how we presented it to the panelists, and that's how they've agreed to it. However, I think we can make the recording available to the public. The reason being, we want this group to have priority in the Q&A because this is the group that asked for it. And then we can make the recording available.
We should
That-
also ask the people that are presenting also if they're okay if by us sharing with everybody, right?
Only I think it's going to be a very important webinar, and it would be a shame if others eventually. I completely see where you're coming from about Q&A, but it'll be a shame if others don't have an opportunity down the road to listen to it.
Okay.
He's famous, so thank you. Well done for getting him.
Thanks. Sandra, you can unmute yourself. Look, Leslie, I see you. I'll unmute yourself next. After Sandra.
Yes, first a simple question. Some proposals really could be either climate proposals or ecology proposals. Can you submit one proposal and put it in both categories? Should you submit the proposal twice, once for each category? How do you want that handled?
You're not allowed to ask questions like that, Sandra. Sorry. No, it's a tough question. Yeah. What do you think, Tom?
I have an opinion. I mean, just in the interest of time, I think we need a proposal considered in one work group.
Yeah.
So I would say
I would agree.
Submit it to the work group where you think it's the best match, right? And if something comes in and we say, oh, that really needs to go to the climate, or the four co-chairs could discuss that. But I would say pick the work group that you think is the best match for the topic. And let's deal with each proposal in one work group, because I assume we're going to have a lot of work groups. So we don't have a lot of time. So plus we don't want one work group to consider a proposal and decide one thing and another work group to consider a proposal and decide something different. So.
Well, if a topic is raised by different submitters, one puts it in the climate, one puts it in the ecology, you folks may want to merge
we
them
might have
together.
to make some calls about where we're going to put certain issues.
Yeah.
And my next question and last one that I have is a more of a personal question. I know there's going to be one of the sessions this summer that I'm not going to be able to attend because of my family's vacation plans. I would like to be able to be present when the proposals that I'm responsible for are discussed. Is there going to be any way of getting these kinds of personal concerns considered?
The short answer is yes. We would let you know ahead of time when we're thinking of discussing your
Yeah.
proposal, because the idea is that we tell everybody, hey, prepare yourselves for these proposals that we will be discussing in our next meeting. So of course, if you cannot make it, that we wouldn't schedule it without you. I think,
Yeah.
right? Eileen, Andy?
Yeah, because ideally, you're going to introduce your proposal in the meeting live. So
Mm.
obviously, we would wait for you to be present. Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I would just say within reason, right? We'll do everything we can. If somebody's like, well, I'm gone for 6 weeks and I mean, right. So it's got to be reasonable. We'll do everything we
Yeah.
can to work around, as long as
Okay.
people can make themselves available
Mm-hmm.
at some point in the middle of our process when we need to get this done.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question.
Leslie, you can unmute yourself.
I'm just curious about how far afield we should go relative to public forests. For example, Emil mentioned invasives and the topic of regulating the propagation, distribution, planting, et cetera, of invasive species regularly comes up in the New Jersey legislature. It doesn't go anywhere or it gets undone. But is that the kind of thing that would be part of these proposals, or is that, because it does relate very much to public forests, but I don't know whether you want it in these proposals.
Yeah, I would,
Okay.
of course.
Yep. And we identified that in the ecological health work group as one of the concerns that we assumed would likely come up. Invasive impact of invasive species is already on the radar screen for that work group.
Well, just the issue of regulating them and making
Anything related to invasive species, whatever the solutions are that are needed, regulation, more funding, whatever it is, I think it's all on the table.
I'm happy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Ken, you are next. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry, thanks. So I think the idea of letting us submit proposals continuously is a great way to go. But that brings up the question, well, maybe we had the question before that anyway. If we find that we've submitted something, but now we realize that we need to amend it, I assume that we can just alert you to the fact that this is amended, and we can feel free to do so.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine, unless, of course, we've already discussed that proposal and reached consensus or done voting. But I think that can be done.
Yeah, I'm really thinking like, within a couple of weeks after submitting it, that
Yeah.
right, as we collaborate and we get more people working on it, we
Yeah.
may have some more material.
Yeah, Ken, right now we have the form so that if you want to revise a proposal that you submitted, you should be able to, but we haven't tested it. The devil's in the details, but right now it is showing that you may go back in and revise a proposal that you've submitted.
Okay, great, thank you.
And also, I don't know if, Andy, I think you've mentioned this, but I don't recall. So the deadline is July 5th, but we will continue accepting proposals. It's just that we're going to prioritize the ones that were submitted by July 5th. Did you mention that?
Yeah, kind of in the order they're received. So if we have 2 proposals by July 5th, they're obviously going to be prioritized, but we're going to begin reviewing the ones that come in behind that soon thereafter. So just keep submitting them as time goes by is the kind of moral of the story, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question from Doris Lynn. If the goal is consensus, that sounds like the goal is to silence minority views. There are so many points of view on these issues. So if the point of the task force is a consensus report, it's going to sweep all minority opinions under the rug. So Doris, everything will be in the report, even the minority opinion. Even if we reach consensus on an item, we will still report the disagreeing opinions or any other points that you would want to highlight. So the report is going to be, if you can envision it as if it was a recording of all of our work group meetings, it's going to include everyone's opinions of everything, consensus, non-consensus items. I think, did I answer that question? I think we Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, Emil, is this a legacy hand, or do you have another question? Mute. Oh, he's actually not on mute, so maybe he can.
Yes, no, that was not a legacy hand.
Okay.
So I think it was Greg was asking a question about sort of how specific a proposal should be, so as I think what he was trying to get at was if the legislature, instructs the DEP to do something, not to leave it so much up to the DEP's discretion as to miss the target. For example, and it's been so long that I can't remember if, the typical 50-foot buffer for wetlands is specified in the legislation, or if the legislation just says protect the wetlands with a buffer area.
Mhm,
It's, because it's 34 years ago.
mhm.
And I used to know what it said, but my point is that if you think somebody's writing a proposal, if you think something needs to be a certain way, and you have, good background evidence why it needs to be that way, then it should be specified in your proposal and in our recommendation to the legislature.
Mhm.
Because if the legislature just says, protect natural areas, then then the DEP's at the discretion to do whatever they want to natural areas, right? But if the proposal talks about all the things that need to be done to protect natural areas, whether it's funding, whether it's, surveying for, rare species or whatever it needs to be, we want the legislature to direct the DEP to do that. We don't want the legislator to leave things up to the discretion of the agency, because there'll be a lot of things that they never do because they don't have the time and energy and money to do it.
Mhm.
So, and they're even stuff that they're directed to do, they may never have the time and energy and money to do it, but at least they've been directed to do it.
Mhm.
So, so that we don't end up, with something as silly as a 50-foot buffer for a wetland, which is basically useless, so that's just what I want to point out. We need to be specific. We need to be directing what's needed, not just in a philosophical way, but in a concrete, physical way that hopefully then the legislature would actually put into the legislation and be very specific about it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, Emil. I think also I just add to it, just be as specific as you can, but always remember, I keep saying our goal is consensus. So if you have
Right.
science that supports 150-foot buffer or whatever that might be, put that in there. But if you say it needs a 5,000-foot buffer, it may have been a great point, but now we're going to struggle to get consensus because
Right.
people are, you know what I'm saying? So,
Absolutely.
so be as specific as you can. Yeah.
There needs to be something that backs up whatever it is that you're requesting, but we don't want it to be whittled down to nothing. Certainly, I mean, at least, the legislature is going to whittle stuff down because that's what always happens. But then if they're so non-specific, then, the chances that we get anything meaningful become less and less and less, the more, the less specific we get and the less rigid that we get in terms of what's really needed scientifically. There was a good example of this with the Toms River buffer with the Pinelands Commission about a wetlands buffer when they did the Toms River corridor about maybe 15 or 20 years ago. And, they actually got the buffer increased in the Toms River corridor because of science. And, the Pinelands Comprehensive Management Plan was amended to take into account these larger buffers, for example, in the Toms River corridor, because there was new science. So, that so it can be done. My point is, I'm trying to actually be optimistic. It's really hard for me to do that, but I'm trying to. And
Thanks, Emil.
We appreciate that.
So anyway, I just wanted to elaborate on that point. We have to spell out a lot of stuff as plain can be and as justifiable as we can. So.
Agreed. Thank you, Emil. Sarah, I'm gonna ask you to unmute. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And I just think this is great. You guys are doing a great job, Andy, and Eileen, and all of you guys. I have a question about the proposals themselves. As others have said, 2,500 words is not very much. And clearly we're going to need to get in the references to the science in some compact way. And at some point there was talk of having supplementary materials as part of the proposals. Now, aside from a reference list, which I hope is not going to be included in our 2,500 words when we give the references. Is that also something that is acceptable? I just think I remember that from the first meeting that was part of what could be submitted.
So Sarah, if I understand your question correctly, when we were talking about supplementary material, we were talking about the references as supporting information for your proposal, and that is what is included in the Google form.
Okay. So just references and not additional documents that we would.
Well, you have, right, there's the peer review section, and then there's the other supporting information section. You can feel free to add as many in that part.
Okay, great.
I feel like, Eileen, isn't there like the space to upload a certain number of documents in each of those?
Yeah, 10 and 10, so 20 total. Actual references, so PDF files or Word files, a total of 20.
To that point, a lot of articles now have what's called a DOI number, and you just click on it and it takes you to the article.
You can put that in the narrative section. There wasn't a way to, this is such a great question because it's come up. There isn't a way on the Google Forms to say these links. So if you have a link for a public access article, we ask that you put that in your narrative section.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and then PDFs and actual files you would upload then into the file upload section.
Okay.
So I'm going to share very quickly. Can everybody see the proposal submission? Yeah, so what Eileen was just referencing is right here, this other references, peer reviewed. So 10 and 10 for each, and then the DOI number, if I got that right, I always forget that, should it be included in the narrative, which I just missed it, which is right here. Should Eileen, Tom, Andy, is there anything else I should point out now that I'm sharing my screen here with the proposal?
Yeah, just the links for the public access articles. That is the best way to share information. We don't want to violate any copyright laws with the paywall articles, but if there's an article that really gets your point and you really want to use it, like I said, please contact us and we'll figure something out. But for any other articles, we do ask you to get open access articles. There's plenty of them. There's a lot of different ways to get them. But you know what? Once in a while, you'll have that one article that just isn't. So.
Yes, thank you, Eileen. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. And then Matt, I see you have your hand raised. You can unmute yourself now.
I hope I'm not misunderstood here, because I both agree and have some troubles with something very fundamental that was said a few times indirectly this meeting and directly the last meeting. But there's more gray there than we realize. That's the idea that science should drive the process. And I teach, among other things, science, technology, and society at NJIT. And it's a very rich area with a lot of controversy. It's fascinating, but I'm not going to waste your time on that. But some of it is esoteric and out there. But some of it is pretty germane, both directly and indirectly. And at the end of the day, I'm not disagreeing with you. My personal opinion is you're right, but I think you need to be a little more nuanced about it. One of the things I hope we've learned from the COVID era, for better or worse, is that science does not drive things, particularly since a lot of people are skeptical of science for various reasons. And I'm hoping, the social scientists and so forth are working on that problem. But I think science and society have to come together in ways we haven't discovered yet. But we shouldn't think, oh, science says it and therefore it works, because among other things, science is not perfect. It's the best single thing we have, but there's plenty of times when it's not always lived up to its billing. The two things that I think are most relevant for our purposes, I thought I heard in the last connection, and I may have not heard it right because I was on the phone. I thought I heard there was an interest in bringing in more of the Native American perspective, which I like. And I thought I heard we're working on it, but we don't have it yet. I just have this hunch that if we're successful, some of the things we might hear don't necessarily jive with a science orientation. Now, maybe they're ahead of us on some things, but it's something that, you know, if we're going to show full respect, we might have to somehow creatively weave it into a science perspective. And the other thing that I think is most relevant, it was an article I used in my class a few times for tests because it's so wonderful. It gets at some very tricky issues. And this by now might be old news to most of you. But, you know, one time we didn't know that a lot of the forest is underground, you know, and these trees are connected. And at this point, it gets a little bit interesting and controversial. Great final exam question, because some people are saying the trees are basically talking to each other. They're communicating. They are sending food to those who need it. They're helping each other because they can sense who needs it. They're sending warning signs to threats. And they're using that kind of like a people-ish language that some people object to. But the point is, from a scientific perspective, a pure scientific perspective, I believe they're right, but I could see some scientists saying that's crazy. So that among other things raises certain issues about how we look at science. Maybe I'll stop there. Hopefully I haven't confused anyone.
Matt, thanks so much for all of that. That's the beauty of science, right? Like, I feel like within the scientific community, within one topic, there's people disagree. So I guess it's our task to bring that literature that would support what you're trying to propose or how you see a solution. It might be something completely opposite from what another person is suggesting within the same topic, just because within science, there are disagreeing opinions. And one scientist might think that the other one is crazy. But that, I mean, yeah, that happens, right, within science. So that's why the process of consensus, right? So you put out your idea and we want to hear from everybody what people think, if they're in agreement, and if not, why. And then we will document that. But that's why we want to hear from everybody, because even within one specific topic, people can disagree 100% or very little. And that's the beauty of this process, I think. So we're open to all articles from science and all scientists. Hopefully I answer your question.
Eileen, on the Native Americans, I know you were doing something on that today. Did you want to? Because that's come up a couple times now.
Yeah, it's come up a lot, as it should, as it absolutely should. And we have been reaching out and we're continuing to. In fact, Tom has a contact that he's going to pursue. They, as you might imagine, the same community now is being asked by many, many, many groups to participate, and they're overwhelmed. But I do think that this is one that they really have an interest in, and I'm hoping that we'll be able to secure one of the representatives from, you know, the Commission on Tribes here in New Jersey. But we're still pursuing that. It's excellent. They absolutely should be a part of this, and we hope that they will.
100%. Okay, thanks, Eileen. Thank you, Matt. Rich, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you, Angela. I appreciate that. Just was wondering if it would make sense or not to have some proposal dealing with water quality within public forests or not.
Yeah, that's Eileen's favorite topic. She would love to see that, Rich. Yes. All
Okay.
issues regarding forests. We're not limiting it to anything, just public lands.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Okay, I don't see any hands raised.
Is Mike Van Cleef on? Yeah.
I was looking for him and I don't see him.
He's going to be one of those phone
Is
numbers,
he a
I
phone
think,
number?
and they
Okay, so
can't unmute.
Jim, I see that you've raised your hand, but I'm gonna go to the phones just to make sure. I'll get back to you, Jim. Thank you. Let me just look for the phones. Okay.
You want to unmute those and just,
So people on the phone, press *6. Ask, oh, I see it's working.
Hello.
Hi, who is
Hi,
this?
this is Mike Van Cleef.
Hi, Mike. I'm so glad you were able to join us.
Yep. How you doing?
Good. So everybody, so we wanted to hear from Mike. I mean, of course, he's part of our work group, but he successfully was able to submit a proposal all the way through the end. So we just wanted to get your feedback, Mike, if you can share with everybody if you experience any difficulties or sort of any tips to get the whole process going. We know that you have, an area of expertise and you're very knowledgeable. So of course that help you inform your proposal, but any insight that you want to share with everybody could be very helpful. So please go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't have any particular problems, submitting the proposal. I basically worked in a Word document and kept checking my character count and just pasted it in. Everything seemed fine as far as that went. The only thing, and it's funny, is I was listening in about, certain kinds of references, like, I found I don't have access to journals, but I can get the abstract. So what I had to do, or at least at the time, what I thought I had to do was basically I printed the abstract, a web page, to a PDF, and then used that as an attachment because I couldn't think of any other way to do it at the time. And also like a web page from Pennsylvania Game Commission, I did the same thing. But I heard that you mentioned, putting a link in the body of your proposal. And that made me think of another idea because it's so limited, the amount of characters, and some of those web links could be many characters. Maybe just put those things into a Word document and attach a Word document with multiple links.
yeah, that's a good idea.
That is a good idea. And also the DOI, I think I have that right, which is how some articles, it's like your identity number, essentially. And not a link, but it's like a serial number for an article. That could also be useful.
Okay.
This is all
Yes, no, that's good.
I mean, Mike, you were able to submit the proposal, so you are good. And we will look into the abstract situation on a case by case, as we've mentioned earlier. So we're going to look into that, but just a suggestion for everybody. That's a really good idea of just like creating a document with links.
Well, we need to talk about that, though. If you send us 100 links, we can't possibly ask. We'll be asking all of you to go to all those links and read them. So think about you receiving, 50 links from someone, one proposal, and that's just one proposal. So we'll give it some thought, the best way to incorporate links. So hopefully by tomorrow, which is the Ecological Health Work Group meeting.
I guess you could have for Mike. Can you guys hear me? I have a question for Mike.
Emil, yeah, I know you have a question for Mike. Give us 1 second. So Mike, do you have anything else to share about the proposal submission?
No, it did seem to go smooth for me. I mean, I think it was just the link part of it and not having access to some of those journal articles myself that I stumbled on. And my assumption was, well, this is pretty drafty, we're going to be meeting with other, combining things and everything else. So I guess my hope was that someone, would be able to provide full links to the real articles that I was just sending abstracts from.
Mhm.
So I guess
Yeah,
that
and
was
that-
my biggest sense.
Yeah, thanks for that. That abstracts, Angeli pointed out also that abstracts are useful. They give you some information, not all the information. So if you're using an article to validate a point that you're making, we're hoping that the entire article will be available for review. It would be better to base your premise on a whole article rather than an abstract. So if you don't have access, if all you have is the abstract, then I would ask that you find another entire article where someone could look at the methods, the entire body is there for review. That's the best kind of validation for, whatever you're proposing there, whenever possible, again.
Case by case. So Emil, I know you have a question for Mike, so please go ahead.
Well, it's not really a question for Mike. I think it's a question for everybody. So I'm assuming that Mike didn't have access to some articles because they were behind some sort of a paywall where he would have had to pay money. But Eileen, before you were talking about copyright situations. So is it the case that if suppose one of the folks here is a faculty member somewhere and they can see all of these articles and they can print them out, is it a copyright infringement to make a PDF of one of those articles once they've paid their money and printed them out?
We'd have to look at each individual outlet, but when my initial look, yes, it would be. We're not students at that university. I think professors do have some license to disseminate an article to a class, but they don't have license to access a pay article at their university and then disseminate it to non-university affiliates. But we'll double check on that.
Okay, so in other words, if I go to a library at a university and photocopy an article from a journal that's on the stacks.
And if you disseminate it, yes, you're in copyright infringement, technically, but we'll look into it.
Well, we've got to solve that problem. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean,
we don't make the laws, but
I know we don't make
get
the
some
laws.
leniency, maybe with some like
But
Elsevier.
in this case, we're all students. I mean, we're trying to learn from each other, and because maybe it's not a problem of the electronic age. What you're saying is that this would have been a problem 30 years ago if we weren't students at a university.
No, we will look into the copyright so that we know absolutely. My preliminary research is that we don't want anyone violating copyright laws. The preference is if you can get open access documents, but in the meantime, we'll get to the bottom of this, Emil.
All right. Thanks. Well, hopefully, maybe there's somebody on a faculty somewhere who's on this call, or somebody else in the task force that's a faculty member that can help us figure this out.
Another problem that I had was when it's a chapter or chapters in a book. So there's some really good books about deer overabundance, deer impacts, and that's kind of hard to, just find a simple link for chapters in a book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right now, the way to do that would be in the narrative, but as you say, that takes up a lot of space in the narrative. So we're going to look into another mechanism for those types of references that are taking up too much space in the narrative.
So far, copyright infringement, and then what you do with textbook.
Or special topics books, really.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Emil. Mike, is there anything else you would like to say?
No, that's it.
Okay, thank you so much for sharing.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep, no problems.
All right, Jim, you're up next. You can unmute yourself. Oh. Sorry, Jim, you're still muted. There you go.
There we go. Okay, sorry about that. I apologize for missing a little of the beginning of this conversation, but I guess I need some guidance. So, to me, the whole forest management conundrum comes down to what we're trying to manage for and what we're trying to achieve. And we can achieve a lot of things in terms of forest management. And I've worked on strategies to preserve old growth forests in the Northwest, and I've worked on strategies to reduce fuel loads and wildfire risk in other places like California. What I guess what I'm saying is this is obviously complex, and I trust for whatever recommendations we provide that we don't have to have all the literature necessary to justify what that management objective is. I mean, I think of a goal of just simply trying to maintain healthy forests, but the strategies will change depending on the landscape and the specific objective. So, I mean, any guidance for how to deal with that? And I guess I would add to that I would suggest to everybody on the phone that while they're searching for science, we just need to recognize that all management decisions should be science-based, but I doubt that there's adequate literature to justify all the things we're likely to recommend. And so I hope in the end we're not creating a treatise, but we're providing a science-based and sound set of recommendations to the senator, so he understands perhaps how to help us create a legislative framework that's going to allow us to engage in forest management, whether it's designed to protect remaining old growth forests or it's designed to try to reduce fire. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So what?
It does to me, Jim. I think that's well said, science-based. I mean, to me, it's just important for all of us to bear in mind that ultimately this is really a stakeholder process. That's what we're doing here, right? We're not a panel of judges, weighing scientific evidence or facts like in a judicial setting. We're convening a stakeholder process. It's just that in doing so, we're stressing that, the ideas that come out of this process should be science-based, right? They shouldn't be sort of put together in sort of a vacuum that doesn't sort of consider the best available science that we have to guide us in those decisions. So the way you couched it makes, resonates very much with me. I don't, if my other co-chairs agree with that. But this is a stakeholder consensus process that is giving a lot of weight to, the consideration of science in relation to the ideas that we, consider and ultimately recommend.
I guess the only other thing I would reemphasize, Tom, I appreciate that comment, is that, I don't know that there's one set of objectives for forest management that applies to all landscapes in New Jersey. The resources are different, conditions are different, the threats to the forests are different. And yes, some are man-made and some are natural. And so I guess I will submit some ideas for how to approach that. But, I think that's probably the larger challenge, is to be in agreement on what our ultimate objectives are and ensure that whatever guidance we provide is science-based and will help us get to those objectives. But, I come from a multiple use world. That's what I was trained in, and that's how I, managed the agencies I managed, and the decisions about what happens in, the northern parts of the state as opposed to the Pinelands are very much going to be condition driven.
Mm-hmm.
So I just struggle a little bit with one set of recommendations that could fit all circumstances.
Well, Jim, I would add to in your proposal, remember we did talk about kind of what part of the state is your proposal possibly targeting. So in your proposal, you can be specific. This is Pineland specific. This proposal is dealing with prescribed fire in the Pinelands. So it doesn't have to be the whole state, to your point. The state is very different from north to south. So that can help, because again, to your point, you can't, if you present a proposal that makes sense for the southern part of the state, it may not make sense for the northern part of the state, and now we're stuck with no consensus. But if the proposal had been specific to the south and it made sense to a lot of people, perhaps we could get consensus on that proposal if it was just dealing with the southern part of the state. So keep that in mind when you're doing these proposals. It's okay to be more specific.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Jim. Geoffrey, I'm gonna ask you, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I guess my question is kind of hypothetical in a sense, but so all of these proposals that everybody's putting forth, science-based, all this stuff, ultimately, to do any forestry work or whatever management tool we're implementing or recommending that the state implement, ultimately it's going to come down to money and whether the state has it, whether they're going to allocate it towards this or not. So should we be putting in our proposals potential funding sources or how we expect the state to be able to afford this? Or is that not something that we should even be considering in our proposals?
No, that is incredibly important. If you have a way where we can get funds from, pathways to finance management or anything, the legislature would love to hear that. So it is incredibly important. That is equally important as your ideas on how to deal with the issues, for sure.
Okay, what if those ideas to get funds wind up causing more issues because they go against other proposals that people have put out? You know, for example, say Pennsylvania, they do timber harvesting to help pay for X, Y, and Z, but that goes against other proposals that maybe people have put in there to, you know, not have trees harvested on our lands or anything like that.
So I mean, you can put forward any idea that you may have. The thing is that we're going to discuss it, right? So we're going to try to reach consensus. So if it's a controversial idea and if it goes against what a lot of different people think is appropriate, then it's not going to reach consensus, for example.
Sure. Okay, so potential funding sources should be included in any proposal.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Matt, is this a legacy hand or do you have another question? He does have another question. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, so I've learned a new word today.
Yes, legacy hand.
This is in a way a little bit related to the last one, but I'm also going to pick up on something I heard. You know, water is Eileen's favorite issue. And my favorite issue, or one of my favorite issues for over 40 years in New Jersey, hasn't come up at all. And that's the green economy. And New Jersey has a relatively new office of the green economy, and they have not made a presence in issues like this, I think, unfortunately. So where this is all going, is it worth my time putting in a proposal with some people's help to find a role for a green economy in all this? And because I really need people to run ideas by, because I have a lot of sub questions on how to go about doing that, including what is the role of the economy in all this? Should it be a big factor? Should it be a tiny factor? Should it follow the recommended policies? Should it inform the recommended policies? Or do people feel it's just totally irrelevant to what we're trying to do here, and I shouldn't even bother? Because I can see all sorts of possibilities, but I don't want to waste anybody's time on this if people think it's got nothing to do with what we're here to do.
Well, Matt, so the four of us, we don't want to censor any type of ideas. So if you have the idea and it has to do with the issues and it has to do with public lands, please put it forward. It's not a waste of time. You never know what can be the solution to the problem, and it's typically in a very creative way. So that's why we're here for, right? I see Eileen, you're nodding your head, and Tom too. Andy, you better nod your head. You have to nod.
Yeah, and I would just again, Matt, I'd send you to that spreadsheet. You put down an idea you might have. I'm looking for people to collaborate with, and if nobody seems to pick it up and want to help you with that proposal, maybe it's the one that you just kind of table. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's probably the best way to try to figure that out. Yeah.
Well, that's happened to me many times, so I'm used to that.
All right, thank you, Matt. Laura, I'm gonna ask you to mute yourself.
Yes, I had a question about an email that I received, and this is somewhat related to the idea of sharing emails. I just want to make sure that I think it says it came from the New Jersey Task Force, suggesting that there were emails going around to people who were on the task force, and those emails were not from the task force. And I just want to say, I don't believe I received any emails, and that probably says more about me than task force members. But I wondered, if we're sharing our emails, are we going to be inundated with messages? Like, how will we know if they are task force messages or not? Or like how, I mean, can we send messages to each other that are not task force messages? Should we only be responding to task force messages? Like,
I
any
think,
thoughts?
yeah, I'll just take a stab at that, Angeli.
Go for it.
So first, I would say anything that we have directed is from the four of us is coming from the New Jersey Forest Task Force Gmail. Okay. If it's not coming from that, it's not coming from the four of us. Okay. However, when we put this collaboration tool together, you likely may receive an email from someone else, or you may send an email to somebody else. That's not coming from us, obviously. That's just a communication going on between two folks that are on the work group. And that is totally, that's fine. That's the whole point. That's what we're trying to do. But, you know, we're not privy to those conversations. We don't need to be privy to those conversations. We're trying to encourage collaboration. So hopefully that answers your question. If it's not, you know, the only messages that are coming from the four co-chairs are coming from that Gmail account. So.
Okay, thank you.
Cleared up, okay.
And Andy, just to remind people, the rules of engagement did include no one should be mass emailing all the task force members. It's one thing to be, this is why we created this spreadsheet. So people, you can see what ideas people are working on. You can see who's working on them. You can connect with those people, but as the rules of engagement generally have, you know, say it's a no to just be mass emailing every time, because it would just be, none of us want to get in that situation where all of a sudden we're all getting mass emails from
200 people.
Members of the, it's just, Lord knows we all have too much email already. So we're counting on you to use your discretion about what is appropriate, connecting with folks in the task force that want to be connected with on various issues versus, you know, like harassing everyone with mass emails to the full list of people.
Thanks, Tom. Doris, I believe you're next. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much. Someone mentioned earlier that a proposal might not reach, we might not get consensus on a proposal if the proposal is too broad. Can't the proposal be amended as we go through our discussions?
100%.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially if the goal is to reach consensus, right? And some people may have something to add to it or something to slightly change. If you're in agreement with that, then the proposal can be amended. And then that amended form is what we're reaching consensus to, and that's how it's going to be reported.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so Joe, you are next. You can unmute yourself.
Hey guys, thanks for everything. I appreciated the question about revenue proposals. And I think the question was, is it okay to do that? Angela, you said definitely. You also said try to include a revenue proposal in any other proposal that would cost money. I think it would be, wouldn't it be okay to add that on a case-by-case basis, it might make sense to break out your revenue proposal into its own individual proposal?
I agree, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I was going to say that before when the question was asked, but it may make sense sometimes to just separate the two so that we can talk about each one individually. Yeah, good point, Joe.
All right, Matt. Assuming not a legacy hand, so go ahead and unmute yourself. You're muted.
Yeah, just a quick comment on, maybe a chuckle when Emil said about university stacks. The last university library I was in, I couldn't find the stacks. But on that related topic, I noticed earlier, Danella was on the call. She's the head of the sustainability program at Kane, and I think they have a new campus somewhere in the Highlands. So maybe you want to run the copyright distribution issue through her, and maybe she has an idea for you so people can access those articles. I don't see her now, but if she's still here somewhere, she can tell me if I'm wrong. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Okay. Does anybody else have any questions? We have 10 more minutes. Maybe the phones. I'm asking to unmute the phones just in case. Yeah, I only see 2 phone numbers, and you can unmute yourself by pressing *6. Okay.
Hi, this is Dorianne Kerber from Milltown.
Hi, Dorianne. We hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, that's great.
Do you have a question, Dorianne?
No, I don't. I didn't have a question, but I think we were unmuting everybody that was on the phone, but I will have it for the next meeting, of course.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I think if everybody's in agreement, we can have 10 more minutes of our afternoon and cut this short. Andy?
Yeah, I'm good. Is Jim a legacy hand, as you like to call it, Angela? I think he is, maybe.
I think so, but let me just, for the sake of Jim, you can unmute yourself if you have a question.
Yep.
Jim?
I don't have a question.
Okay.
I just, I guess this looks like a very interesting challenge. That's all I'm going to offer. And I do hope that there's a way for us to effectively coordinate and collaborate on this. I don't envy the 4 of you trying to figure out how to do all that, but I look forward to the challenge, and I appreciate all the time you're already putting into this. So thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jim.
Jim.
All right, so I think, Andy, I think we are good.
Yep.
All right, we will send out all of those links that we said we were going to share. So please look out for emails from us. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a good afternoon. Thanks so much.
See you. Bye-bye.